The one of the what do you call it? The one of the interesting things that Jews have is that Jews, any two Jewish men, always have something in common to talk about. You meet two people, and two Jews meet. There's always something to talk about. You got the Parsha. If you're learning Daf Yomi, you got the Daf Yomi, right? We're always on the same, one way or another, we're always on the same, more or less on a same page. And so two Jews could meet, and you know, we're all in Shemos now. You know, you'll get with the program. You know, there's no such thing. Well, I'm on Vayera. No, you're not. You're on Shemos. We're all on Parshas Shemos. You go to a Shabbos table. There's almost a natural icebreaker at a Shabbos table. I'm not talking about the soup. You know, there's a natural icebreaker. You've got something to talk about. Everybody's basically doing the same thing. Not only that, you could basically predict. A Jew goes to another Jew's house for Shabbos. You can basically predict what the menu is going to be. They tell you what the menu is going to be. There's no surprises over here. It's like you're going to go into the house. There's going to be fish, and there's going to be soup, and there's going to be what do you call it? You know, so you can basically predict the whole that Shabbos day for sure. There's going to be chol. Shabbos day for sure. There's going to be chol. Okay. So page 292. Ve'elu Shemos b'nei Yisrael habayim Mitzrayim. These are the names of the Jewish people coming to Mitzrayim. Ace Yaakov, with Yaakov. The word ace, which is that Hebrew word that has no English equivalent, sometimes it's just it's there. In this context, it means with Yaakov, ish uvei sobo. They came along, each man in his house. So you have over here, before anything, you've got the foundation of, really the foundation of the entire Jewish life. The foundation of Jewish life is a Mesorah. A Mesorah. We have a tradition. What do you call it? We have a tradition from father to son. And you have over here grown men who are all family men. These are all people with families. Yet, who are they connected to? With Yaakov. Ace Yaakov. They come along with Yaakov. These are the Shvatim, who are themselves on a very high level with their families. Yet, they're connected to the father Yaakov. And in Judaism, that's the way it goes. There's a Mesorah. There's a tradition from father to son. There's a tradition dating all the way back to Har Sinai. And what's remarkable is, people ask all the time, I'm sure you've spoken to Rabbi Gottlieb about it, or whoever you've spoken about, is there a door open? There are people out there. Could you ask the people out there, to take the show elsewhere? What's remarkable is, when you think about the chain of tradition, people always ask, how do we know that our Mesorah is correct? How do we know that our tradition, there haven't been mistakes? Try not to sit at this table, okay? Try to sit over there. There should be seats over there. Yeah. I didn't kick you out. You weren't in order to be kicked out yet. Take these chairs away so the temptation is removed. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And somehow they came back. I know. What do you call it? The Rebbe, yeah. Remember, if you're close to the Rebbe, you have to pay for the bracha. Yeah, yeah. Then we can talk. Yeah, then we'll talk. Yeah, it's not a bad parnasa. Yeah, the Rebbe. So you have this chain of tradition that we have. People always ask, well, how do you know that the Mesorah was handed down properly? People, how do you know the oral Torah has been handed down properly, generation to generation? Maybe there were mistakes, right? People ask that all the time. Maybe there were mistakes in the oral tradition. So you have to keep in mind first that people say, well, what about, if you've ever played broken telephone? The chumashim, there should be more chumashim for all the guys who came in. You ever played broken telephone at a party? Right, where you start with a word, and by the end of the line, you come up with, you whisper it to another guy, and then he ends up with the wrong thing. So how do you know that our tradition has been accurate? And the answer is that our tradition, first of all, broken telephone is usually a game that's played at a party after a couple of drinks, right? And nobody takes it too seriously. And part of the shtick is to see how strange it is by the end of the line. Here, you're not talking about something that was taught word to mouth. You're talking about something that was lived generation to generation. I've asked you, how old were you? How old were you when you knew what you do and you're in a car and you come to a red light? How old were you when you realized you stop? You're probably 2 years old. You're probably 2 years old in the back of your father's car, and you picked up a pattern. Red light, stop, and you drove everybody nuts also. Red light, stop. Green light, go. Yellow light, mommy, stop. Daddy, go. All right, and you pick that up. You notice what was going on. And so, yeah, no, you probably never even read in a book. You never even read in a book that you stop at a red light. Whoever read that in a book? You do that long before you ever. How old were you when you knew when you're supposed to say please and thank you? Anything that was important to your parents, they instilled in you early on. How old were you when, if you ever burped out loud? How old were you when you found out you're not supposed to be doing that? Right? Your dad came home with his boss, and you decided to put on a performance at the table, and you were taught very clearly with the little physical therapy that that is not something that you do. And there was no oral, there was no written doubt over there. Not only that, in every Jewish home, every piece of electronic equipment in a Jewish home has an oral Torah. Right? You have a microwave, but you know that it never works and you just close it and push a button. You got to close it and kind of give it with the elbow. You got to hit with the elbow. There's a whole tradition how to work it. The washing machine only works when you wedge a comb between the second and third buttons. So in every Jewish home, there's always one teenager who knows how to run all the equipment in the house. If Chaim isn't home, none of us could do laundry now. That's the way it works. True or not true? Even Monopoly has an oral tradition. You play Monopoly. What do you do on free parking? Nothing. You don't lose. Official rules of Monopoly, free parking, you do not lose a turn. Nothing happens on free parking. But we're Jewish. We're not going to waste the space, so it goes money. We put money in because Jews aren't going to waste a good space on a Monopoly board. So you got to put in money. There's an oral tradition on everything. Okay, so what did we happen in our houses? We've lived the oral tradition. It's not that we've told it over. I told you, kids from the earliest age, a child knows that Friday night you do like this. Friday night you pick up, you make Kiddush. And at Havdalah, a 2-year-old at Havdalah is already doing like this. And they're already putting on, a black box on their head and walking around with straps, playing tefillin. Because they've seen it. It's not that and not only that, it's been done through thousands of families all over Klal Yisrael. Millions of families all over Klal Yisrael has been going on. So we have a chain. Are there certain details that may have gotten mixed up? You got Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. So people say, well, how do you know? I'll tell you what. You know what? Put on either one that you want. But neither Rashi nor Rabbeinu Tam said, don't wear tefillin at all. No one said that. And neither Rashi nor Rabbeinu Tam said it's okay to eat pork. That they didn't say. There's only one argument, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, about the parchments in the head tefillin. So far they've agreed. There are parchments and there are head tefillin, and they're black and they're square. What was the placement of the order of the parchments in the head tefillin? That's the machlokas between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. That's not bad for a 2,000-year-old, 3,000-year-old tradition that one detail got mixed up. To the contrary, that shows you that the rest of it, if there's no argument, obviously that didn't get mixed up. So the tradition it's that Eis Yaakov Ishu Vesobo, Eis Yaakov with Yaakov Ishu Vesobo, that we are attached to the previous generations. That's the basic idea here in the Parsha. Do you know the story about, there was the, did you ever hear the Blazhever Rebbe? The Blazhever Rebbe. He was nifter a few years ago. I think he was 100 years old when he was nifter. So he was in the Holocaust. And the Blazhever Rebbe was a very big tzaddik. He was in the Holocaust. And there was, one night they took them out to, the Nazis took out all the inmates, and there was a giant pit. And they told these guys they got to jump across the pit. Right? They got to jump across this pit, and anybody who doesn't make it across, they're going to shoot them right. If they land in the pit, they're going to machine gun them in the pit. So these people are trying to jump. Everybody keeps missing, right? So the Blazhever Rebbe is in line. They're standing in line. Nobody was making it. They kept killing the people. The Blazhever Rebbe is standing. There was a secular Jew that he had befriended in the camps, and they're standing in line ready to go. The secular Jew says to the Blazhever Rebbe, forget it. I'm not going to jump. Let them kill me. I'm not going to give them the satisfaction. The Blazhever Rebbe says, what do you care? If we don't make it, so we'll die. We'll get to Gan Eden a couple of minutes later. A couple of times. Well, I can't hurt to try. And they're weak, and they're they're starving, and they're weak. And there isn't a chance to jump across this pit. So the self-executive, they finally get up to the pit, and they decide to jump together. And they jump together. Next thing they find themselves on the other side. They made it. So the Jew says to the Blazhever Rebbe, how did we make it? How did you make it across the pit? So Rebbe says, I have ancestors, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I grabbed hold of their coattails and I held on to their coattails. That's how I made it across the pit. But you, my friend, How did you make it across the pit? He says, Rabbi, I held on to your coattails. Right? So that's the tradition. Klal Yisrael's tradition is that we're holding on to this Mesorah. That's the Mesorah that we've got, and that's why the entrance to Mitzrayim begins with, they came to Mitzrayim with Yaakov Avinu. Okay. Then the Torah goes through the names of the Shivatim, and then it says in Pasuk Vav, Vayamas Yosef v'chol echav v'chol hadorahu. Now Yosef predeceased all his brothers. Are you aware of that? Yosef predeceased all of his brothers. Why? The Gemara says we see from here, Rashi says in the previous Parsha, Yosef died first, and Yosef died at 110. He died before the brothers. That's why at the end of Parshas Vayechi, he says, please bury me. I'm going to die, and I want you to bury me in Eretz Yisrael. So Yosef died before his brothers. Why? So the Gemara says, because authority, a position of authority, oila l'rabbanus, woe to a position of authority. When a person takes a position of authority, a position of prominence, shemekaberes es ba'aleh, it buries the person who's got that position. And I think that there's a double meaning. It buries you with responsibility, and it also sometimes causes a what do you call it? It causes a premature death, because you've got this responsibility plus there's the concern. Now, obviously, it didn't happen to Yosef, but there's a concern of the person who's got a position of authority, especially if there's a lot of honor, that he becomes haughty and arrogant, and therefore that cuts his life short. But there's the responsibility, there's the pressure of the position that takes a toll on the person who's got the position. Now, if you take a look at the first Rashi in the Parsha, so Rashi says, Ve'elu Shemos b'nei Yisrael, af al pi shemena'an b'chayehem, even though it counted them in their lifetime, b'shmosam chazar umenan b'misasam, and it counts them again at their death. Lehodiach chibasam, to let you know the belovedness of the Jewish people. Shenim shalu lekochavim, the Jewish people are compared to stars. Shemotziamu machnisa b'mismaru v'shemos, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings in the stars by names. Could you believe it? By numbers and names. Shenemar hamotzi b'mispar tzva'am lekulam b'shem yikra. The pasuk in Yeshaya. Every star has a name. You know, we look up at the sky and say, well, they're just stars. Every star has a name and every star has a purpose. And it has a function. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't create the stars for nothing. So the Jewish people are compared to stars. Now, I think we've spoken about this in the past. Why are the Jewish people compared to stars? Three different reasons. Three different reasons that we're compared to stars. Why are the Jewish people compared to stars? We're also compared to sand. Can I trouble you? Nisim, open the door so you get some air. The heat was on. I'm going to have to sabotage that machine. You just flip it over for a few minutes. Do you know that in television talk shows, I'm going to tell you a perfectly useless piece of trivia now. In television talk shows where they have they have the host, and then they have the guest, and he interviews the guest, and the guest goes and sits on a couch, and then they bring in another boring guest. So the couch that the first guest is now sitting on has a stream of cold air blowing out underneath and on their feet. Do you know that? You probably didn't know that. You know why? You don't know why? So they don't fall asleep. And by the way, anytime they do anything, it's usually because something has happened. It's usually a response to something else. So apparently one star once did fall asleep on national television, sitting on the couch while the other one was boring the world to death. And so they guess they decided we can't have that happen. So anytime that there's a law is made, the law is usually a response to people breaking a law. Now, most people, if the law finally, if they make a law, so it means that you can't sell a certain drug. Well, it means somebody did. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the law. So that's why you never give a shiur in a warm room. You give a shiur in a warm room, you may as well bring pillows instead of chumashim, right? So that's the rule. It's got to be a little bit of air circulation. Good. Now I got that off my chest. So the Jewish people are compared to stars, and there are three reasons we're compared to stars. Reason number one, and we've spoken about all this in the past. Reason number one is that the stars look at these little dots of light. If you get close to a star, what's the nearest star? 3 million light years away or something? Is that the sun? What's the 3 billion light years? They got it down. It's not 3 billion and one. It's 3 million. They got it exact. Whatever these stars, whatever the distance of these stars, if you could get closer enough to the star, what would you see? You see this giant planet bigger than the Earth. Most of the stars are bigger than the Earth, right? Yet, what do we see? We see a little dot. The Jewish people, when you see another Jew, what do you see? There's a Jew. You know, Dovid puts on tefillin. Yeah. The closer you get and the more you get to know somebody, the bigger he becomes. The bigger a Jew becomes. Unfortunately, we only find this out when a person dies. And then you hear that he's being eulogized and somebody says, well, he gave a lot of, you know, he supported 10 families. I didn't know that. And do you know that he always held the door open anytime he saw somebody behind him? He held the door to make sure nobody doesn't close. Wow, really? And do you know that he always gave his wife the credit card without making an issue? No kidding, right? Now we're into science fiction, you know. It's a tzaddik, you know. We're talking about one of the 36 of the generation, you know. You know, and all of a sudden you find out, and the more you find out about a person, the bigger he becomes. And this is certainly true with the Gedolei Ador. Rav Moshe Feinstein, the Chafetz Chaim, all these people, if you spend the day with Rav Moshe Feinstein, you'd be blown away. You would go nuts realizing that there could be such a human being. Yeah, we read the stories, you hear a story, hear a story. You spend the day with the Chafetz Chaim, you go out of your mind that there could be such a human being. That's why, so where the Jewish people are compared to stars, because, you know, we always talk about, well, he's another Jew, he's a Jew, he's a Jew. Every Jew in the world who's trying to grow, there are two Jews. There's a Jew who's trying to grow and the Jew who's not growing. It doesn't matter what color your yarmulke is, as long as it's black. And it doesn't matter what color your clothing are, what color your yarmulke is, what color, if you have payas or you don't have payas. Are you a Jew trying to grow or you're not trying to grow? Any Jew who's trying to grow is a lot bigger than we think. Because we look at him, we see a person, we don't know his battles, and we don't know his Yetzer Hara, and we don't know how many times he wanted to stop and talk Lashon Hara, and he stopped himself from talking Lashon Hara. We don't know how many times he was going to say something inconsiderate and didn't say something inconsiderate. We don't know how many times he averted his eyes from looking at something inappropriate. It's impossible to know. We only know one thing. Somebody who's working on himself is beyond our comprehension. That's the first idea. The second idea is that the stars, when did the stars get created? There's a beautiful idea that I saw, I think it was Shem, who is it? He brings on the Kemotze Sholo Rav, brings, I think, the Chassam Sofer, Rabbi Baksh. Rabbi Baksh was a Rosh Yeshiva in Detroit. When did the stars come into creation? So you had, let there be light. So we know that the Torah says there were two big lights. The sun and the moon, they were created equal. Remember the Medrash? Hame Oros HaGedolim. There were two lights. And the moon came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and said, you can't have two kings with one crown. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the moon, L'chiyu ma'ati esatzmech. You're right, go reduce yourself. I'm sure the moon at that moment was thinking, no, that's not where I was going with this. You know, this is not quite I don't think you picked up where I was going here. So the Hashem said, go reduce yourself. And the moon was depressed because now the moon had to be reduced. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do to appease the moon? He created the stars. He said, okay, you'll be in charge of this massive army. So the stars from their very inception, what were they there for? What was their point? Their point was to help the moon and to relieve the moon of any pain. That's the role of a Jew. The role of a Jew is that you try to help your fellow man and relieve your fellow man of any pain. You see somebody who's going through difficulty, try to help him out. Sometimes you hear about somebody's got an illness or somebody's financially strapped. So what can I do? What can you do? You can certainly daven. Certainly daven. You believe in the koach of tefillah, or you don't believe in the koach of tefillah. Do you believe davening helps, or you don't believe davening helps? If you believe davening helps, so daven for the person. Say tefillah. It doesn't mean you have to say it all day, every day. Say at least one tefillah. Take their name and say it tefillah. Please, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ruvain ben Leah, send them a refuah shlema. Say a tefillah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears every tefillah. So the stars the Jewish people are compared to stars because that's a concern we're supposed to have for each other. And number three, every single star has a purpose. You know, there's something called the astrological system, and if you look at the Sfarim, there are various energies that HaKadosh Baruch Hu releases that come through the stars and the mazalos and all sorts of interesting things that happen. But that means that every single star, if it has a name, it has a purpose. Every star it wasn't like God said, oops, got a couple extra Milky Ways over there. That was a mistake. Every single of the billions and trillions and bajillion stars, every single star has a purpose. It's got a function in God's world and God's creation. And the lesson is obviously every single Jew has a function in God's creation. That means nobody could do your job, and nobody could do your job, and nobody could do my job, and nobody could do your job. Every single one of us has a function, and there are no two Jews that are identical, no two Jews have the same challenges, no two Jews have the same personalities, no two Jews have the same life circumstances. Every single one of us that serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a Kiddush Hashem. That's what we learn from the stars. You have your job in life, I have my job in life, you have your job in life. And no two people can serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu the same way. In the same way that there are multitudes of stars, and that the stars each have clearly a purpose, otherwise Hashem wouldn't have created them, so too, every Jew has to know you are unique, and you have a task, and you have to do your task just like every star has to do their task. Okay. The trouble starts in Pasuk Ches. Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim, asher lo yada es Yosef. A new king arises in Egypt who did not know Yosef. And I skipped the Pasuk. Sorry, Pasuk Zayin. Uvenei Yisrael poru vayishritzu vayirbu vayatzmu bimod meod. The Jewish people increased very much. Vatimolei haaretz osam. The land became filled with Jews. Jews, everywhere you go there are Jews. And the land became filled with Jews. Now, the first idea here is, there's a famous medrash that they were having 6 children at one time. Yeah.
Sicklets?
What do you call it?
I don't know, sicklets?
Ciclet, not six. I would call it sixlets. Yeah, not sicklets. Sextuplet.
After 4, it goes like
Quintuplet, quints, and sextuplets, septuplets. So they're having six tuplets, right? I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with one baby. Right, one baby is one of the most traumatic experiences you'll ever have in life when you have your first child. Right? You're like, whoa, they're just kind of moist and wiggly, and they cry a lot, and you're just like, whoa, what, and then next thing you know, they're crying at 2 a.m. and at 4 a.m. That's why somebody once said, how did you sleep last night? Well, I slept like a baby. That means you got up every 2 hours and screamed, right? Slept like a baby. And then the worst thing is, everybody else you talk to, you find out, oh yeah, our kids sleep 12 hours straight. My kids never, if they slept an hour and a half at a stretch, we're doing well. And you're just overwhelmed. Then you have twins. I got twin granddaughters. I remember the parents say, twins? Twins are double the work and double the nachas. Double the work and double the nachas, and it's unbelievable. Yeah, and if one is up, the other one cries. One goes to sleep, the other one wakes up. Your job. Can you imagine 6? There was a Jewish couple, by the way, Columbus, that had 4 quads, quadruplets that were the heaviest quadruplets in the history of America. We're going back about 35 years now. The heaviest quadruplets in the history of America. They got all sorts of stuff. They got a year's supply of diapers, and 4 cribs. All the companies gave them all sorts of stuff. But it's like, I think they're all married by now. There are 2 frum couples that I know of that have quints. 2 frum couples have quintuplets. I think one is from South Africa and one is from Canada. What?
What's quint? How many?
5. 5 quintuplets. Therefore, yeah. That's like you have 500,000 right away. Just all you need is a center, a mincha, a center. We need a 10th man now. You basically have it's like instant family. Right, instant tribe, right? So it is. It's beautiful. It's exhausting, but it's beautiful. It is beautiful. There's the one family in Israel. I think there's one family, one husband, one wife have 22 kids. Here in Israel, yeah, they got 2 minyanim. They split up. If there's a Sfarad and there's a Ashkenaz. They're different minyanim over there. That's the shul. I don't daven here on Shabbat. It takes care of a lot of problems. They don't own a car. They don't own a car. They own a train. But it takes care of a lot. Listen, I knew a family that had twins, irregular and twins, in the first 3 years of marriage. They had 5 kids under 2.5 years old. How do you like that? They had like an automatic diaper changing machine. You see a bread maker, you put the dough in and it comes out of the other loaf of bread. They had like you put the baby in one end. They didn't, but it would be a good idea. Then I knew another family that had twins, irregular, and then triplets. So they had 6 kids under 4 years old. Right? That's it. It's noisy.
I have friends that the parents couldn't have kids for like 17 years, and then they went to the Rabbi, gave them 4 singles. That year they had twins. A year later they had another pair of twins.
Nice. Yeah, you should have given them a $20 bill. They just had a guy in Israel, a couple in Israel, married 34 years, just had their first kid. Married 34 years, just had their first child. 34 years. Oh, good question. The answer is that it's an excellent question. The answer is that how long, he's asking a question, a couple is married 10 years and they have children, so by the letter of the law they're supposed to get divorced. Yet the later poskim say that it's an option. They don't have to if they don't want to. They have the right to. Not only that, the Gemara says it could be that each one, if they marry somebody else, will have different mazel. But it's not enforced. It's not enforced. Mazel means that a different fate. Call it a different fate. It could be that there's a different way to call it. In any event, So the Torah says over here like this: the Jewish people increased and multiplied. The land became filled with them. Now you notice the Jewish people had originally been in the land of Goshen. Goshen was a different region in Egypt. Yosef himself was in Mitzrayim, which was the capital of Egypt. Mitzrayim was not just the country; Mitzrayim was the capital. And there's a land called Goshen, which is very fertile, which is where they put the Jewish people. Paro put them there, and Yosef wanted them there to separate them from the Egyptians. And as long as they were in the Jewish ghetto, everything was fine. They stayed on their own. The trouble started when they spilled over. They spilled over into the rest of the land. And Rashi says over here, and by the way, Yaakov Avinu was in Goshen, Yosef was in Mitzrayim. There's an opinion that when Yosef and Yaakov, they had their big reunion. Remember Yosef and Yaakov had their reunion? And then Yaakov was living in Mitzrayim, in Goshen. Yosef was in the capital of Mitzrayim. And at no point did they meet each other till Yaakov was ready to die. And then Yosef beats him. And Yosef purposely avoided his father. What sense is there? Why would Yosef have avoided his father? Could you imagine after all that time they're separated or reunited and he avoids him? You know why? He was worried that if he would be alone with his father would say to him, so what happened that day? How did you disappear? How did you end up leaving the house for 22 years? And Yosef did not want to have to mention that his brother sold him, so he took a precaution to avoid. That's what the commentary says. How do you like that? Because he didn't want to speak the Lashon Hara. Okay? Now, hold the question and comments. Now, if you take a look, it says Vatibale ha'oretz osam, the land, guys, hold all the comments. Vatibale ha'oretz osam, the land became filled with them. So the Medrash says that the Jewish people filled the theaters. And the Jewish people filled the theaters. And they filled the circuses and the theaters. So, you're an Egyptian, and the next thing you know, every time you go into, you want to go see a performance, there are 3 Jews ahead of you in line, and they got the best tickets. Or even more than that, it could be that not only they fill the theater, everywhere you go, there are Jews around, and if there are Jews around, they're the ones who are always getting they're always taking advantage of all the sales and everything else. By the time they always know what's happening on. But even more than that, I think that even if you look back at the history of America, what does it mean they filled the theaters? It could be that they went to the performances. It could be that the Jews took over the theaters. Who started Hollywood? It was all Jews. Yeah. It's all Jews that started Hollywood. So the entire idea over here is that this goes back to the roots of anti-Semitism. Jews are always trying to cure anti-Semitism. How do we cure anti-Semitism? Well, if we would mix in culturally and we would join the rest of the nations, we'll be just like the rest of the nations. We've seen in Jewish history that didn't work, did it? In Germany, they spit them out because they were mixing in. And all through history, the Jews couldn't they wouldn't let the Jews have any jobs other than being bartenders and moneylenders. The Jews couldn't take jobs in Christian Europe. So it doesn't work. The Jews' success has always been when we stayed on our own, when we've maintained our own Eretz Goshen. That's when the Jews have been most successful in avoiding anti-Semitism. There is no cure for anti-Semitism. There's only what's the best way to deal with it. And the best way to deal with it, keep a low profile and stay on your own. Once you become a little too public, that breeds resentment, and it always had. So, Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim, asher lo yoda es Yosef. A new king arises who did not know Yosef, and there's a what do you call it? There's an opinion over here. There are 2 opinions. Either he didn't know Yosef, the new king who didn't know Yosef and all the benefits he had done for the Egyptians, or he pretended not to know Yosef. He pretended not to Yosef. He acted as if there was no Yosef. Now I want you to look at Targum Onkelos. If you find it, please show the person next to you. It's the Pasuk Ches in paragraph right to the left. If you go into Onkelos, because there's a very interesting principle here. V'kam malka charata al Mitzrayim. There's a new king arose on Egypt. Delo mekayem gzeiras Yosef. He did not fulfill the decree of Yosef. The king did not carry out the decree of what decree of Yosef was there? Yes, they remember when Yosef had decreed that all the Egyptians have to circumcise. And this king comes along, and this king annuls the decree. The Egyptians no longer have to circumcise. Now, the Gemara says there's a principle, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makdim refuah lamaka. Did you ever hear that idea? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings the cure before the disease comes. The cure is here. That means every single cure, every single disease in the world, there's a cure for it. The cure gets there before the illness comes along. It's just a question of finding it. King Chizkiyahu, the Gemara says, there was a book called the Book of Cures. They had a cure for every illness. They had a cure for cancer, and they had a cure for polio, and they had a cure for any disease you could think of. There was a book of cures. What did King Chizkiyahu do with this book? He buried it. He hid the book. Why? Why?
Because people are going to stop talking to Hashem.
That's exactly correct. People, instead a person got sick, so they opened the book. And a person gets sick, what they're supposed to do, they're supposed to be davening. Okay, a person has to go to a doctor, you have to make ishtadlus. But at the end of the day, it was reducing the faith of the Jewish people. So King Chizkiyahu had this book buried. He put a book away. But every illness, I get to 1 second, every illness has a cure. The cure is there. Now, later on in this Parsha, Basya Bas Paro goes down to the river and she finds a baby. And she opens up, skip ahead for a second. Skip ahead for 1 second. Skip ahead to page 296 for 1 second. And it says that she goes down to the river in Pasuk Vav. It's like about halfway through down the page. So Basya Bas Paro, she pulls in the basket. And Moshe Rabbeinu's in this basket, right? Vatiftach vatireu es hayeled v'hinei nar bocha. She opens him up, and she sees the child crying. Vatachmol olav, she has compassion. Vatomer miyaldei ha'ivrim. He's a Hebrew baby. How did she know he's a Hebrew baby? Take a look at Rashi. Miyaldei ha'ivrim, how'd she know? I mean, what do you call it? V'hinei nar bocha. Where does Rashi say it? Says somewhere that she saw that he was circumcised. And where does it say that? It says somewhere she opens it up and she sees that he is circumcised. Oh no, is what it says that where is it? I thought Rashi says it over here. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu was circumcised. She opened up, she saw a child that's circumcised. Well, as a result of being circumcised, she realized he's a Hebrew baby, and she goes to call the Hebrew nursemaid. Well, how'd she know he's Jewish? Because he's circumcised. I don't understand, but if all the Egyptians were circumcised, that doesn't mean anything. The answer is because Paro had already annulled the decree over here that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought the cure before the plague. The benefit for the Jewish people, it ultimately leads to Moshe Rabbeinu being saved, is because right now this very Paro goes and annuls the decree. He doesn't realize as he's annulling the decree, he's shooting himself in his foot. As Paro annuls the decree right here, he's shooting himself in his foot because this is the decree that's going to help his own daughter save Moshe Rabbeinu, who becomes the redeemer of the Jewish people. Now, the Egyptians get nervous because the Jews are increasing. So they start oppressing the Jewish people. Now, I want to show you one point over here. In Pasuk on page 294, Vayavidu Mitzrayim es b'nei Yisrael b'forech. The Egyptians put the Jewish people to hard labor. The Art Scroll translates crushing harshness. There are different opinions on what this harsh labor was. One opinion is that they were doing useless work. They were building these pyramids. The pyramids or buildings, whatever they were building, kept sinking into the earth. That's frustrating because even a person who's getting paid a minimum wage, you want to see that you're doing something. If I would pay you $100 an hour to come into this room and tap on a table 10 times every hour, tap on the table, I give you $100 an hour, you wouldn't last too long. You know, how long could you do that for? How long can you do that for? Oh, yeah, make a few $100. But after a while, you go out of your mind. You can't do. You need to feel in life that you're contributing, that you're being productive. So I heard somebody once said you guys probably know this from, maybe you do, maybe you don't. There's something in secular philosophy about this guy who's in prison for 20 years, and they strap him to, he's on one side of the wall and he's strapped to a millstone, right? And he's grinding this millstone every day as in the millstone's on the other side of the wall, so he can't see what he's grinding. And after 20 years, all day, every day, he's got to grind with this millstone. Then after 20 years, they release him from prison. And the first thing he does is he runs to the other side of the wall to see what he's been grinding the whole time. And it turns out there was nothing there. And at that point, he just drops dead on the spot. The fact that something like that, he drops that on the spot, or he becomes a White Sox fan, or whatever it is. Not sure what happened to him. You know, a fate worse than death. Something happens to this guy. Something happens to this guy, and he can't take the fact that he did nothing. He can't take the fact that he did nothing. So one opinion over here, listen carefully, gentlemen. One opinion over here is that they're doing useless work. It's backbreaking, it's hard, and by the way, Egypt is hot. You know, we're not talking about Northern Ontario over here. We're talking about hot Egypt where you're being whipped, and the Jewish people are put to forced labor. There's another opinion that says it was role reversal. The men had to do the women's job, and the women had to do the men's job.
That's happening today.
What's that?
That's happening today.
It's happening today, but not quite yet. But today it happens by choice, right? But in those days, they were forced to do it. Now, I want to tell you something. What's so terrible? Okay, so you'll be a house husband. So you'll be a house husband, or you'll be a what do you call? You'll be a woman is doing backbreaking work. So what's so difficult? The answer is that any time you feel inadequate at something, if I would sit down and bring out a book in Japanese and tell you start translating. Where do I even begin? You know, it's so frustrating, and you're so inadequate at this that it breaks your spirit. For a man, a woman, take most women, to put them to hard labor, they have to go work with heavy stones and build. It's not that they can't, but they're inadequate. This is not what you're made for. You're not suitable for this, and it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. Hold all the comments. Do me a favor. Hold all the comments, okay? It's extremely. I'm one comment too late, as it is. It's extremely frustrating for a person to do something which he's inadequate at. For a person to have to then try to do something, I'm like telling you, I want you to write me an essay, but do it left-handed, assuming you're not a lefty. I could work my way through it. How frustrating that is. So for a woman to do that kind of backbreaking work is extremely frustrating. And for a man to go into the home and take care of the children is also frustrating. It has nothing to do with you love your children to pieces. But a man is not programmed to take care of children. And there's an easy reason for that. Why is it that women do not have the obligation to fulfill time-bound mitzvahs?
What does that mean?
A woman does not have to do any, she's not obligated, any mitzvah that has a time. Like you have to say Kriyas Shema by a certain time and daven Shachris by a certain time. A woman is just like that. What you got to do, put them together and hold them if you have to. A woman does not have to do, a woman is exempt from time-bound mitzvahs. Why is she exempt from time-bound mitzvahs? Because a woman's internal clock works differently than a man. And that's why you have all these shows and all these comedies where the wife is always late, she's never on time. Why is that? It's not a criticism, because we have no criticisms. There's nothing negative in a woman's nature. It's that we're programmed to do a job that can't be put on a clock. A woman's main job is domestics. And you can't put children on a clock. A woman cannot be looking at the clock passing while she's taking care of a baby who's colically and she's got to sit with him for 4 hours and just burp him and just pat him. You can't be looking at the clock. You go out of your mind. A man has to take care of the kids and always thinking about, well, when am I going to catch mincha? Right, and you can't. You've been with them for 10 minutes already. Well, when do we go on to the next stage? And there's an idea of nurturing. Nurturing takes a long time. Women are always talking to their kids. Right? They're always talking. Always talk about talk. Why? Because the kid has to learn how to talk. The kid has to learn how to communicate. Well, how long does it take? It takes a good 3-4 years. For when I talk to my kids, I expect within 10 minutes, let's go, Baba Kama, come on, let's do Tosos, kid, enough of this crawling around over here. And you could just go out of here, you got to break up a fight, change everyone on when I've had a babysit with the kids, my wife gives birth and she goes off to what they have these convalescent homes for women after they give birth, and I've had to stay home with the kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, I have to stay home with the kids. I can tell you can put me away. Right? You make a kid, I'm a demon at corn patties, by the way. I make the best corn patties in a microwave. My kids ate corn patties and brownies for 4 days, By the end of the time, they're looking at me, Daddy, when's Mommy coming home? And, so I feed the kid, break up a fight, change a diaper, then go check, go put, you're running around. Time is standing still. Then all of a sudden the kid comes back to me, Daddy, I'm hungry.
Mm.
You mean you're hungry? I fed you 7 hours ago. What's with the hungry over here? You know, how often does this have to happen? Then you get an appreciation of what your wife is doing in the home. It's not it's a question of we're built with a clock. We have an internal clock. You're talking about a job they can't have a clock. So the Mitzrayim figure out a way to break the spirit of the Jewish people. Put them each in an inadequate situation, and you're going to get very frustrated people with a broken spirit. Now, one last point. The word perach, avodas perach, comes from the Hebrew word, perach means to crumble. Parich, where they talk about a cake in Hebrew, a parich, a cake is parich, it's a crumbly cake, number one. And number two, perach means, it comes from the Hebrew word paroches. What's a paroches? A curtain, like the paroches in the Aron Kodesh. There's a paroches. What's the purpose of this avodas perach? Is to draw a societal curtain. That means, if you want to create a subclass, a lower class in your country, what do? Put them to harsh labor. What did the Germans do with the Jews? They made them scrub the streets, right? And all the famous stories of Jews on their knees scrubbing the streets of Austria, that sort of thing. What does that do? That gets the rest of the society to view these people as a lower class. That's what the Egyptians want to do. You put them to back-breaking slave labor in order to make a paroches, in order to make a division between your people and these people. And then if you make that division, then you're going to end up oppressing. You'll be successful in holding these people down. Okay? Itamar, what were you going to ask?
So I was going to ask about, you mentioned that the best way to, prevent anti-Semitism for Jews is to keep his head down, to keep quiet. And right afterwards you said it was only after the Egyptian king forgot about Yosef, forgot about the Jewish people's prestige and what they did the bad things start happening to the Jew. And it seems like
they mixed in. It says that they mixed in. The Jewish people mixed in. It says they mixed. It says Vaitim Alei Haaretz or something.
When we keep on our own and when we stand out, when we're not apologetic about being Jews, it seems like everything was good for us in Israel. When we were Jews, when we were proud Jews, we were above everything. We were in charge of the country.
That's when we're in charge. That's when we're not in exile. We're talking about while we're in exile. There was a certain time we had the base of Midas. Shlomo Melch was the king. The Jewish people were out of exile. That was the means. But that's one short period of Jewish history. But the rest of Jewish history has been exile. All right, gentlemen, I'm in a hurry. I have to.